Hands, a ghost story. Dillion was into Urbex, urban exploration, which was sketchy enough, but even worse, he liked to explore alone. He'd heard lots about the big house overlooking the Valley of the 16. Everyone in town had heard about it. It was said to be haunted and home to a coven of night floaters, malignant beings able to detach their heads from the trunks of their bodies. It was also said to be the scene of a disastrous Ouija Board session, which resulted in one death and one case of insanity. Other rumors said it was the scene of a murder, an axe murder, or at least a strangulation. Well, with a background like that, how could Dillion resist? So Dillion went alone, as he liked it that way. Besides, he figured no one would want to come with him, nor did he tell anyone where he was going, lest they tried to dissuade him. It was long after the darkness had taken control, with a pale half-moon in the sky, when Dillion set out on his expedition. The town had grown considerably since the house was built, so he was able to leave his car in a nearby drugstore parking lot before hoofing it on to his objective. The old house lay in shadow, the nearest street light being several hundred yards away. Dillion walked nonchalantly to the rear of the property and found the back door unlocked. Dillion was instantly on his guard. This was too easy. He'd never been one to break in, but had no problem crawling through an open window, and at some sites where there were no doors at all, you could just walk right in. But was there some sort of silent alarm that registered when the door was open? Perhaps security or the police were on their way now. Or was it left unlocked because they figured everyone in town was afraid to enter? Well, Dillion wasn't afraid. He closed the door behind him before turning on his flashlight and was surprised to see, furniture. Intact furniture. Antique chairs, tables. There were even pictures on the wall. Pictures, paintings. And the walls themselves. Why, there wasn't any graffiti. No graffiti. Had no one else been here? Something brushed his face, but he wiped it away. Cobweb. Except there weren't any cobwebs. Dillion walked on down the hall, only to notice still another strange thing. Dust. As there was no dust. None at all. In the past, Dillion had used footprints in the dust to tell him if others had visited. But now there was no way to tell. Again, had no one else been here? Or did they have someone come in and clean? Wild. Just wild. Dillion found the old dark house in pristine condition until he reached the dining room. It was empty. Well, not entirely. For on the floor was a Ouija board, a number of old wine bottles with gutted candles, and an old pair of jeans, women's jeans, caked with blood. There was blood everywhere. It was all over the floor, smeared everywhere. It even covered the walls, in the form of handprints, the prints of bloody hands all over the walls. It looked, it smelled like a crime scene. The reek of blood was so strong, Dillion felt like he was going to be sick. And then something brushed his face again. Then something touched his face. A hand. A human hand. But there was nothing there. And then Dillion felt a hand on his arm, but he couldn't see it. The hand was invisible. And then Dillion saw the blood on his arm. Fresh red blood. Dillion swore in surprise, and then something slapped his face hard. Slapped it twice. Dillion staggered back, only to have invisible hands, for there was now more than one, grab him and try to pull him further into the dining room, further towards the pool of blood. Dillion jumped back and turned to run screaming down the hall, while invisible hands tugged at him, tugged at his clothes, and tried to pull him back into the bloody chamber. Dillion had lost his flashlight, but he could still see in the dim light that the formerly clean walls were now covered with bloody handprints which chased him down the hall, now empty of furniture, dirty and full of dust, which filled his nostrils, filled his mouth, which was choking him. Dillion felt his throat grabbed by a powerful hand, and then he passed out. Dillion didn't show at school for a few days. How would he have been able to explain the bloody fingerprints that covered his throat? Indeed, he was plagued for many days and many long nights by the sensation of invisible hands touching him all over his body. He left town at the first opportunity, trying to put as much distance as possible between him and his invisible digital persecutors. But even now, separated from the haunted house by both miles and years, Dillion sometimes feels himself being tucked into bed by invisible hands. He sleeps with the lights on, all the lights on. Oh, in the big house overlooking the valley of the 16, it's still there, and the back door is still unlocked. Care to visit? I double dog dare you. The moral of this rather touching story: as you travel the darkened corridors of life, keep your eyes wide open, your legs ready to run, and keep your hands to yourself. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix here, that's PX here, while the music was The Dreadful, The Dread, by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod. And I promise I'll try to play it louder.